year. Tonight's discussion will center on the new book by Chef Thomas Keller. It's called The French Laundry per se, named, of course, for the chef's two most celebrated restaurants, the French Laundry in Yountville, California, which is in the heart of the Napa Valley, and Per Se in New York City. Now, if you'd like a copy of the book for yourself or a relative, a friend, a neighbor, a colleague, or anyone you can think of who would enjoy it, you can find a link to purchase it in the chat column. Personally, I can think of no better holiday gift to give or receive. Yes, that is a hint. The French Laundry per se is exquisite. It's a cookbook, yes, with recipes and stunning photographs that would be welcome on any cook or food lover's bookshelf, but it's very much more than a cookbook, as you'll see when you start reading through its pages. I really started thinking of it as a biography of sorts, of Chef Keller, of the other chefs and associates and friends who have played such a prominent role in shaping these two incredible restaurants, and of the restaurants themselves. These interwoven stories are told with poignancy and passion and reflect Chef Keller's conviction that restaurants, all restaurants, are forces of great social consequence in our world. And as I said, that is a point we're constantly reminded of during this pandemic. For tonight's event, we're thrilled to have Chef Keller, the author, with us. Those of you who've eaten at the French Laundry or Per Se are the lucky ones who understand the uniqueness of the experience, how his restaurants conceive, prepare, and present a meal in a way that never leaves you. Chef Keller is, to put it mildly, a superstar of cooking globally, the only American chef to have 2 restaurants with 3 Michelin stars. He's been designated a Chevalier of the French Legion of Honor, among numerous other culinary achievements. He also runs several other restaurants and has written several other cookbooks. Clearly, he never sleeps. With Chef Keller tonight is one of the most important protagonists in his story, Cory Chow, chef de cuisine at Per Se in New York. You will be inspired by Chef Chow's path to the pinnacle of the culinary world when you read the book. Suffice it to say, he developed an early passion for food and cooking and realized his dream of working for Chef Keller when he joined the Per Se team in 2007. We're also very lucky to have as our moderator tonight, Michael Ruhlman, the writer for all the books in the Thomas Keller Library and the author of 25 books that span nonfiction, fiction, memoir, and cookbooks. Lastly, it is always such a treat to introduce a dear friend, Alice Waters, who is the official presenter of tonight's event. A champion of food literacy and food justice, Alice is arguably the most influential chef and food advocate of the last half century in America. She revolutionized American cooking, shaping these restaurants in my hometown of Berkeley, California, more than 40 years ago. In the decades since, she's received the French Legion of Honor, 3 James Beard Awards, and has authored more than a dozen beautiful cookbooks. Among her proudest accomplishments is her founding of the Edible Schoolyard, which enables school children across America to grow and prepare nutritious and delicious food, and to learn about food's connection to community, to our collective health and happiness, and to achieving broader justice and equality. We are so thrilled to have all of you with us tonight. Thank you so much for being here. And Alice, the floor is yours.
I guess I should give a toast to Thomas.
Thank you, Alice. That's sweet. Very kind of you.
Congratulations.
Thank you, darling.
I have the book right in front of me, and it's opened up to a salad garden. And I just love this page of somebody watering the vegetables on one side. But it's really been interesting at this moment in time that all of us as restaurateurs have sort of communicated with one another about what we are doing. And I've had a number of conversations with Thomas just about finding out how we can get the insurance support that we need and what they're doing to sell food under these circumstances. And I realized how close we really have been. We have a lot of mentors in common, and we have a lot of values in common. And just looking over the book, I haven't read it completely yet. It's a thick volume, but just hearing about the stories of people that work in the restaurant and the way that that he is creating food together with them, that it's a collaboration in the kitchen is so important. That, I mean, kitchens have always been in that sort of French pyramid. And I think what's happening is that we're realizing that it's creating something really special can be greater than the sum of the parts. That it's not any one person. And then we all know that the real, how should we say, creator of the dish is the farmer or the rancher or the fisherman. And if that person is planting the seed in the right place and taking care of it in the right way and picking it at the right moment, that when it comes to us, we can really let it shine forth. And I think it is a unique experience that people have had at farm-to-table restaurants around this country. They have been awakened by the taste of real food. And that's what I really see as the silver lining of this pandemic, is that we can become really more locally focused, that we can connect and support the farmers who are taking care of the land and their farm workers, and supporting the restaurants who are trying to keep themselves alive and their producers to support those places. But I have one great per se story that many of you may have heard about it because I talk about it so much. It was many years ago, and Thomas, after he opened, he said, please come to per se. And I said, I promise, I'm coming. And it's hard for me when I'm in New York. I'm there for a little bit of time, but my daughter happened to be in New York City. And she said, Mom, I want to go to per se. And I said, I'd love to take you there. Thomas has asked me to come. Let's go. So we got there a little bit early and we sat in front, I think it was by a fireplace. Is there a fireplace in the front room there?
There is, yeah.
And immediately, there was no asking, you're early. None of that. It was just as if we were part of the family. A drink came and a little dish of this and a little dish of that. Then we were moved to the dining room. And Fanny and I enjoyed probably one of the most memorable times ever together, just the two of us, because it's very difficult, as you know, as children get older, even when they're teenagers, to get any real time. But because we were there and everything that came to the table was talked about by somebody very knowledgeable, everything from the wine to the little details of the dish. And then Fanny and I, she's so interested in food, started to having this conversation about it and memories of other places we had gone. Well, we had a 4.5-hour dinner. 4.5 hours I had uninterrupted, except by this beautiful hospitality. And also creativity. I mean, it was about art. And I've always thought that art can lift up food to this other place. I mean, there's the taste, but then there's the plate. there's the way that it's put on the plate. There's a kind of way that the room looks. There's the way the waiters are dressed. There's the aromas. You're trying to appeal to people with all of their senses. And that was what happened. And then he invited Fanny and I into the kitchen. And we said hello. And then we had a box of chocolates presented to us right at the very end. And you know how when you get a box of chocolates, you always want the one, you have to break it in half and share it. But these were 2 small boxes of chocolates, and we didn't have to share any of them. And I'll never forget that. I mean, we were so high leaving the restaurant, and it was a really exceptional experience in that way. And if you want to capture your children, take them to Per Se. Because it's an experience like going to a museum of food. And you don't eat like that all the time. You don't think about food like that. And so, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. It's always, you know.
But I could say a lot more, but I just think this book is going to tell a lot more because it's filled with incredible pictures. And I just feel like I'm kind of in that dish. And the photography is pretty exceptional, I have to say. I've never had pictures in my books. And I'm kind of jealous about this book.
Well, perhaps let me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. It's wonderful to have those kinds of memories. And, you know, it's interesting because, you know, people talk about success in many different ways. And some people associate success with fame or with fortune, but we know it's not really about that. What it's about is memories and giving, you know, certainly our guests, our friends, our family, a wonderful memory. And what better memory than around food? And so it's so wonderful to hear you recount this memory with Fanny at Per Se, because that's really what it's all about. And I'm so happy that both of you got to experience that together, because it's one of the most important things, as we know when we're going out to dinner, is not where we're going, but who we're going with, and to spend those hours with Fanny as you did. And to have those memories, and she has the same ones, and you'll have those for the rest of your lives. So thank you.
I just want to add one thing, that it's so important for me to know that you know where all the food comes from. And I want to go only to restaurants where that is a priority for them, to understand the nutrition of it and the deep meaning of that.
So true. So true.
Alice Waters, thank you so much. You have been an inspiration for so long, and clearly from all you've said tonight, you continue to be so. May you always be so, ever be so. Thank you so much for these great recollections. I too have had a meal at Per Se that was like yours, and I would venture to say that it's not because you're Alice Waters that you had that experience. It was because you were a guest of Per Se, which is part of the brilliance of the restaurant. It's part of Cory's brilliance. Cory Chow, please wave your hand, Cory, so we know you're
Paying attention.
He's a brilliant chef. I was lucky to work with him on this book. As of course, as always, lucky to work with Thomas Keller on this book and to put his philosophy and his words and his thoughts and his extreme. Well, let me just say this. I've never met a chef who's more thoughtful than Thomas and more aware, who taught me how to be aware in the kitchen. I know he's taught Cory that. And I'm grateful for this book and the chance to be able to work with Thomas and Cory and David Breeden and Ellen Boyles. And let's get to the book, Thomas. What's this book all about? What's important to you about this book?
Well, Michael, there are so many things that are important about this book. It's hard to just to pick on one, but it's, overall, it's a book about a restaurant, that restaurant being the French Laundry, and how it got its start, how it became the French Laundry, and therefore helped open a restaurant called Per Se 10 years later. With the migration, is a good word for it, a Noah's Ark of individuals that came from the French Laundry to New York City to inoculate a new team with our philosophy, with our culture, with our repertoire. But even more than that, with the idea of giving them even more than what we had at French Laundry. And the green tape story, when for an entire decade at the French Laundry, we tore our green tape to mark things and to take down the past. And how Zion Cruel stood at the past that mid-February day in 2004 and picked up a pair of scissors and cut the green tape and changed the way we thought about that. And how something that which seems so insignificant can become something that's such a huge impact. And the idea of continuing to do a little better every day has withstood the time at French Laundry and Per Se. And you see that every day in our restaurants. It's not these quantum leaps that we're trying to make. It's these modest improvements, this sense of looking for refinement in everything we do. If it's tying your shoes, it could be that. So it's about this restaurant that bore another one, Per Se, and how that started to become influential to the French Laundry, and how they became sisters in many ways, siblings in many ways, and how they've shared not just the repertoire, not just ideas, but individuals going back and forth between the two restaurants to progress and evolve in their careers, and how those careers have influenced the restaurants. And now how that a little bit of competition that exists today, whether it was with Jonathan Beno and Eric Ziebold, or whether it was with Jonathan Beno and Corey Lee, or Eli Kaime and Timothy Hollingsworth, or now today with Cory Chow and David Breeden. It's a proud moment for me to see this book come be published, to know that it's come from three extraordinary chefs who were part of this building of these two restaurants. We all stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. And it's because of those who came before us, we're able to write something like this. So the book is about evolution. It's about progression. It's about refinement. It's about a true team effort between two extraordinary restaurants that continue to maintain influence on one another.
Speaking of evolution, I'd like to get Cory's experience of evolution here. Cory, can you tell me when you first met Chef Keller?
Chef Keller was doing a book signing at a Williams-Sonoma, and I think
Oh dear, you froze.
Mom took a book signing, and it's so nostalgic now, right, that we have a book together. But
How old are you?
I went to his first book signing before I was actually interested in my career, and it was kind of life-changing.
And then you came to the Per Se kitchen as a commis.
Yes, sir. It's great. Started from the bottom up, learned everything, and was mentored by great chefs that Chef talked about that have gone through both of our restaurants. And the book is about their influence on David and I, and sharing with everyone the stories of what we've seen and what we've experienced, and pretty much just showing everyone how challenging this journey can be for chefs, and an insider look of how our brains work and how we create. It's a great story that everyone can hear about.
It is a great story, and you know, this book really is a compilation of all your brains, four big brains, and all the people around you, and all the camaraderie and all the interaction between you. Tell us, Cory, about the per se recipes in the book and what defines them, what makes them distinctive.
I think it has all the recipes from per se has an influence from a moment in time, influence from your culture, influence from your career.
For example,
I would say moment in time would be the sourdough mousseline and the clam chowder, because that's a refined dish.
oh, you froze again. I do love that dish, and I love that story. You froze a little bit. I don't know if you froze for everybody, but this is a story from your childhood.
Yeah, I used to go to San Francisco all the time on the weekends with my father, and we always have to go to the pier, have a Dungeness crab and a sourdough bread bowl, and that's just a food memory, and it brings me back in time, and I wanted to share that with everyone in my own interpretation and how we refine things.
It's a brilliant dish. Thomas, how about you? What's a dish from the book, or a food memory or childhood memory that you bring to the book?
Oh, there are so many of them. But before we get there, it is so important to realize this emotional connection to food, and the sense of bringing that into your current life, your current skills. And you talk about the sourdough bread bowl. I mean, you think about that, and you instantly picture this thing, which is a little bit. A little bit overwhelming in the way it's presented. This big ball of sourdough bread that's hollowed out and filled with clam chowder, and to see that memory manifest itself in what Cory has done, and that sense of refinement, but appreciating that flavor profile, which was such an important part of his childhood. So that's just a magnificent thing to hear him talk about that story. There are so many things here, Michael, that we touch on and we talk about. Steak and potatoes is certainly something that is familiar to all of us in our memories. And David did steak and potatoes in the French Laundry Per Se book. And if you remember, we did something called Yabba Dabba Doo in the French Laundry cookbook, the original one, and how they're associated. And again, this is this idea of evolution and understanding the philosophy and the repertoire, and trying to represent a more refined point of view, or in this case, a point of view that again kind of reminds us of, takes us back to a childhood. I mean, the potato croquette, for example. I mean, who doesn't love a potato croquette? Green goddess dressing. Again, it's the same type of emotional connection that we all have with food, that Cory talked about with the clam chowder bowl or the sourdough bread bowl, that David talks about with steak and potatoes, as we talked about with the Yabba Dabba Doo. I mean, all these things are so interwoven into our culture and into our memories. And that's one thing that we want to understand about a cookbook, any cookbook, or eating, how important the emotional connection to food is. And that emotional connection comes from those memories. And those memories come from, being with other people. Cory talked about his father. And so the food memories that we have are wrapped around our family, our friends, and our loved ones, and then reinterpreted with, that same feeling of emotion, that same feeling of love and dedication and commitment, and then giving that to our guests to have their own memories around. And I think that's just such a wonderful part of this book and what Cory and David and Elwyn have done.
See, that's exactly what I'm talking about. People in the audience listening and watching this, Thomas's awareness of this. I think Thomas was aware of this since he was a young man, and this is part of why he's been successful at this. It is so true, this emotional power of food, and I'm so glad he's recognized it, and he's fostered it in others. And I know that one of the big things that he likes to talk about, and I want to hear more about, and also more from Cory, is mentorship, because we need to move this forward. Thomas always says that, I mean, we always must get better. And he is now mentoring a second generation of chefs, and lucky to be so. He's probably among the first generation of chefs to mentor a first and a second generation of chefs. So I'd love to hear Thomas on mentorship and Cory on mentorship, what he's learned from Thomas and how he mentors.
Yeah, mentorship is so important. And, we think back in our lives and certainly in our careers. And for me, my first mentor and my most influential mentor was my mother. My mother, I was raised by a single parent, my mother. I was the youngest of 5 boys, and she certainly, instilled in me the sense of awareness of the world around you, this attention to detail, the sense of work ethic, the sense of continually to persevere in whatever you're doing till you accomplish what you've set out to do and not give up. That was really important for me. My brother Joseph, who was 18 months older than I am and who embraced cooking from a very young age, and taught me how to make hollandaise sauce. And the story in the French Laundry Cookbook, the importance of hollandaise and doing that every day, that sense of repetition, that sense of ritual that comes from making hollandaise sauce every day, every morning for 2 years, and learning about it so intimately that you understand it in a way that is a complete understanding of temperature, of texture, of aroma. Even if you've made a mistake, if it starts to break, how to repair it, all these different nuances of a hollandaise sauce, which seems so simple and so basic, but to learn that and to have your brother teach you that and to be influential that way. To Roland Hennon, who in 1977 asked me the simple question, why do cooks cook? I couldn't answer the question, and he said, we cook to nurture people. And that's the day I decided to become a chef, because I felt I was a nurturer. It resonated with me, and I embraced this profession with total commitment and total dedication. I just dove right in, and because he was a French chef, that's what I wanted to do. He became my mentor in so many different ways. But there have been so many mentors in our life. But the 3 things that we have to think about today, and we realized this while back, is that there are 3 parts to this process, and you see the results of that today. You see the results of what we've done, not just in our restaurants, but in our profession, because at the end of the day, what we do has to elevate the standards of our profession, not just our restaurants. We have to be focused on the bigger and the greater part of what we do. And so the 3 things that I think about is how do you hire somebody? Making sure that you hire the right person, making sure that person feels confident and has the confidence and courage to come into your restaurant or into your space. It could be anything. It could be in the dining room, not just the kitchen. But we'll talk about the kitchen for a moment because we're culinarians. But this could be in any restaurant area, department, kitchen, dining room, administration, wine team. It could be almost in any profession. Making sure that person has the confidence and courage to come into that environment and actually analyze it, see it, feel it, and then make the decision whether they think they can actually function in there successfully. And the same thing has to happen for us. We have to analyze them. Can they do the dance, more or less? And then once we hire them, we're committed to them 100%, not 75%, but 100%, and giving them the training they need, which is the second part. And that training goes on forever. I mean, it doesn't stop after 2 weeks, like when I was a young cook. It continues throughout the years and the years that they're with us. And then that turns into mentoring. And mentoring is not only from a professional point of view. It could be in some ways in a holistic way in that mentorship. And if you do those three things correctly, what happens? Well, I'll tell you what happens. What happens is that person is better than you are, because if they're not better than you are, then you have not done a good job. And I'm really, really proud to say, and I've looked at this in the generations since I became a chef, and as you mentioned, the first generation of American chefs to actually have their own restaurants and be able to think about things differently than the last generation of restaurateurs. We look at those chefs today, and in my lifetime, what I've seen in not my lifetime, but my career span, what I've seen is continuous improvement in what we do at every single level. So when David and Cory walk into the restaurant, I know that they are better than me. And I'm so proud of that. And I know that they understand that, and they're committed to that. And the chefs that they are training, the chefs that they're hiring, the chefs they're training, the chefs they're mentoring are going to be better than them. And that's just the way things should be in that evolutionary process. If we're totally committed to our careers, to our team's careers, and to our profession, this is the goal.
Chef Cory, you caught Thomas's eye with a Chinese family meal. He looked at David, I think, or whoever was.
Jonathan.
And Thomas said, "Who's cooking family meal?" And Jonathan Beno said, Cory Chow. And he was a commis, and he was cooking family meal. And that's how you began. Thomas, you began cooking family meal.
Yeah.
And you started long ago. If you can be passionate about feeding the staff, just staff meal, nobody sees it, nobody knows it. You can be passionate about that, then you can be a chef, maybe. Then you can be a chef. And Cory, you did do that, and you did become a chef. You became chef de cuisine at one of the greatest restaurants in the world. How do you view your place as a teacher, as a mentor? How old are you now?
42.
Still relatively young, at a very high position because you're an overachiever and you work your ass off. How do you look at mentoring? How important is it?
I mean, it's how the whole restaurant's going to succeed. It's not just about you. It's about the whole restaurant and how the team works together. I learned it from Chef Keller. I learned it from Chef Beno, Chef Jaime. You can see it in the generations that how much influence Chef Keller has on everyone, and the humbleness that he provides to them. Fortunately, being mentored by our, you can see the clear example of how Chef has mentored them, and it's just translated down. My favorite part of the mentorship is explaining the why all the time. This is why you do this like this. This is why you peel a beet, or this is why you saute a piece of meat like this. That's when you're teaching someone and explaining and sharing why, and you learned it somehow from someone else, and you're translating it to them on how you learned it, right? And I think it's to have the patience for that is what Chef has brought to all the leaders here, and for us to teach that to everyone else.
Chef Thomas, what do you want people to take away from this book? What's important for you to know that you're conveying?
Well, it's a good question, and it's hard to really answer, because I think everybody who reads a book, and especially a cookbook of this magnitude, and this to be true, when we did the French Laundry Cookbook, my goal was not just to write a cookbook, but to write a storybook, and that influence came from Ferdinand Point, who wrote My Gastronomy, which has become such an important book in our restaurant group with our chefs. It tells great stories, and that's really, really important, because those stories really connect you with this profession, and that is such an important thing. The recipes are, as Cory pointed out earlier, they're of a time and place. This book was written in the spring, summer, fall of 2018. And even some of these recipes today have already been modified, refined, and evolved. But they were written at that time and place. And as important as they are, they're only a template for us to understand. And looking at the recipes, I know sometimes some of the compositions are very complicated, but within those complicated compositions and in the overall recipe are sub-recipes, which are just fantastic. I talked about the steak and potato recipe with the green goddess dressing. I mean, the green goddess dressing is just extraordinary. So there's many different smaller recipes, sub-recipes in here, which I believe can change the way you cook. The whole section on brining, right, and how to brine is something that is very, very important. The section on pickling and preserving is another section that's very, very important. So you can learn a lot in the book, in the recipe, in the composition portion by digging deep down into those recipes, looking at the sub-recipes. And that's a wonderful thing. The stories, I think, are, for me, are the most important thing. And they are timeless stories about, you know, who we are and what we hope to do.
For example,
the opportunity for me to talk about, you know, my time as a porter, as a dishwasher, and how important that is, and the 6 disciplines that I realized much later on in my career, but I actually experienced them, you know, at a very young age, standing in front of a dishwasher. The idea of being organized and learning how to be organized, the idea of efficiency and being efficient, the idea of critical feedback and embracing critical feedback to continue to improve yourself. And that's something that's so important, is to be able to embrace the idea of critical feedback, because that's the only way you're gonna get better. The understanding of rituals and how important they are in our day-to-day ability to be able to function and produce what we need to produce by a specific time in the day. We're always working as chefs, you know this. Well, as restaurants, we're always working towards that, you know, that 5:30 arrival of our first guest. That's the cutoff time. That's what we're working to. So rituals are so important. That the idea of repetition. We're cooks. We're going to be repeating the same things over and over and over and over again. And what happens when you do that? As I spoke about earlier, the importance of hollandaise sauce, you get really good at it. You become intimate with that skill. And it's so important, the idea of repetition. And then the overarching goal of being part of a team. You know, I understood as a dishwasher, as a porter, that I was part of a team, and they relied on me. And I was really maybe one of the most important part of the team. The bartender couldn't serve a drink without the glasses. The wait staff couldn't set a table without the silverware. The chefs couldn't put food on a plate without the plates. And so this was the idea of all of us working together for common goals. And to be able to tell that story, and I've told that story, you know, many times over my career, but actually to have it now in print, you know, it's just a wonderful thing to share with people and understand that. The end of the book, there's just one page on the importance of words. And, you know, just to talk about this as a dishwasher, you know, in my young age, my first part of my career is washing dishes. And finally going into restaurants, into other restaurants, and hearing the word dish pit. And I'm going, wow, that's horrific, because I never worked in a pit before. I was part of a kitchen team, and I kind of elevated that position maybe in my own mind, because everybody else was calling it a dish pit. And I just didn't appreciate the images that came into my mind about an area where somebody's working that's a pit, you know, and how important words are. So these are some small things that I've been able to share with the reader about this book. And you know how important our farmers are, our fishermen are, our gardeners are, our foragers are. And that's a big part of the book as well.
Let me ask you about that more specifically.
Yeah.
You know, from when we first did the French Laundry Cookbook, we focused on purveyors, as we called them. We focused on Ingrid Benjes and Keith Martin, and so many wonderful people.
Connie Green,
Green, the amazing woman.
Yeah.
Extraordinary souls. So you wanted to continue that, and tell us how, since this book is really about evolution, the evolution of fine dining, the evolution of where dining has come in America, how has the evolution, I mean, you even changed their name. You talk about the importance of words. You don't want to call them purveyors anymore. Tell us about but you want to call them and why?
Well, I really refer to them as our partners because we've been with so many of them for so long, and we partnered together to support one another. Diane St. Clair is a good example of that partnership in making sure that she's able to sustain her livelihood, not just her farm, but her livelihood, and therefore have a positive impact on her community and her family. And there's that perfect example of years after we started working with Diane St. Clair, and she calling me on the phone one day, a little concerned because she wanted to tell me that she was raising the price of her butter. And I said, Diane, I really don't know how much your butter costs because we don't really think about cost of something. We think more or less about the quality of something. And the quality of your butter has always been so far superior to anybody else's that it's almost priceless, if you will. But she said, no, I really need to tell you why. And I said, okay, so tell me the story. She said, well, my son now is just graduated from high school. He applied to NYU and he's been accepted, and I have to pay his tuition. So I needed to raise the price of my butter to pay for his tuition. And you think about that. All of you think about that, is how much impact you have on people's lives when you go to a restaurant. You are experiencing these wonderful ingredients. You're experiencing the wonderful skills and knowledge of the staff that is preparing and serving it to you. And you have just sent a young man to NYU. I mean, these are the things that happen. There's so many things that happen in a restaurant that our guests really never get to see. You talked about Cory and making us family meal. I mean, the family meal every day, twice a day, happens in a restaurant where we all gather together. The team makes us a meal. The dining room staff helps serve the meal. And this is a moment where you're truly together as a family, eating family meal together. And we may have the wrong impression of restaurants and sometimes the way they're represented in today. But I can tell you that restaurants are the heart and soul of our communities. And within those restaurants are true people who are the hearts and soul of their community together as a team. And so our partners, whether it's Diane St. Clair or Brett Wolf or Sue Young Scanlon or all these wonderful people. I mean, Brett comes to the restaurant once a week with his quail. He's been farming quail since I can't remember when, but we've been using Brett Wolf for 26 years. And he's so proud of those quail, and those quails are so exceptional. And, just to have a casual conversation with him as he's delivering the quail and see him and talk to him. These are moments in a restaurant that are priceless and are so connect us so much to these individuals, which makes them our partners.
Cory, I know that one of your great dishes is the poulard. Tell us about the layers of the poulard, what the poulard dish is. Tell us about the super stock, the ramen stock. Give us the combine all this stuff. As Thomas says, the reach of a restaurant is so far from the actual finished plate. It extends so far. So I'd like to hear about the presents and the bird and the dish.
There's so many parts of it that I love. I think my very first part of it is why we call it sauce supreme. Is because famous chefs like Danielle Boulud and John George, they're so old school classic. And when they tasted it, they said, this is sauce supreme. And I said, no, this is how I make it. I make it like this, not classic French. And they go, no, sauce supreme. So it's always called sauce supreme now here because of those two idols, and those guys said that to me. And I said, okay, it's stuck with me now. But it's an ode to classic French cuisine of how to utilize everything. And it's an ode to a mentor, Matt Orlando, at a mass in Copenhagen. Like he showed me this ramen stock and how they do it. And I brought it to Per Se and I said, this is how we're going to do it, how we're going to refine it, and how we're going to come up with ideas on how to utilize this whole product. And it's respect.
You froze again. Respect for the food. I know you're going to say respect for the person who's
Touched the product, whether it's from the farmer to the meat butcher to the person that's cooking the chicken. So it's all encompassing of how we should, like what Alice said about know where our food comes from. So I think it's all those things to sum it up.
It's great that you bring it back to Alice, because she really did kind of start this whole movement, this appreciation. But there's someone else, Thomas, who I'd like you to bring up, who on the chef side really moved us forward in an extraordinary way.
Yeah, you're so right, and it's hard to, separate them because they were both so influential. Alice, as we all know, has really given us a true sense of awareness about where our food comes from, and she truly is a locavore in the purest sense of the word, and she is about education in our children, and that is such an important thing, because now they are growing up with the experience of fresh food and growing food and harvesting food. I mean, that's, I can't imagine that as an 8 or 9 year old, and she's truly brought that to existence in a very good way. The chef that I admired the most during that period of time, and again made us aware almost with a little bit of guilt, is Jean-Louis Paladin, when he moved over from France and began a restaurant for me, which was one of those pivotal restaurants, one of those influential restaurants of its time, and really kind of modeled my career in so many different ways, or helped model my career. He was one of my mentors as well, even though he didn't know me. And that restaurant was the restaurant at the Watergate in Washington, D.C. And when he arrived in America, we as chefs, didn't connect the food we were preparing to where it came from. We didn't know our farmers, our fishermen, our foragers, our gardeners. And Jean-Louis, pounded on the table. What are you guys doing? Where are you buying your food from? You need to do this. You need to do that. You need to be supportive of these people. And, he's the one that spawned Jameson Farms lamb. He's the one that brought us Rod Mitchell. He did so much for us, and it was such an influence and such a personality in our profession that we all, wow, we could be like Jean-Louis, somebody who, and I experienced his restaurant several times. And you think about the French Laundry, and I even think about it because he was writing menus, 4 menus a night, with different compositions on each one, tasting menus that you could have at the Watergate. Just incredible stuff. And so he became a true influence and inspiration for us. And fortunately, as years went on, I got to know him, and we became friends and colleagues. And that's one of the beautiful things about this profession as well, is that those icons, those role models that you see out there, they can become colleagues, and they can become friends. And this is a wonderful profession. So Jean-Louis, for me, was that chef that awoke in me this idea that we need to have the source of where our food comes from.
I'm so glad you talked about that. He was an extraordinary man, and he just loved food, and he was so passionate. He was just such a big personality. And you're right. I've been writing about chefs for 25 years now, and I could tell everyone out there watching this, there are no better people to hang out with than really good chefs. It's because they know about generosity, and they know what's important in life, because they work with the most basic products that we have. And so, I feel so grateful to be working in not only this profession, but with 2 giants such as Cory and Thomas.
Well, thank you for that.
Well, it's true, man. And Cory, it's been such a pleasure working with you. You're brilliant. That ramen stock, everybody, is worth the price of the book. I'm telling you. There
you go. I mean, those are those little sub recipes, right?
Exactly.
I mean, Susie Heller's first recipe that she was going to test for us was Cory's chicken, and she was like, "No way, this is impossible. This is crazy. You guys can't write recipes like this for this book." And of course, we persuaded her to go after it, and she loved it. And you're right, that ramen recipe is worth the price of the book. And it's easy to do, and something that you can have in your larder, right? As a base for so many different things. So
liaisons too, which starts with flour and fat,
Yep.
the basic liaisons. There's so many. What I've always loved about the French Laundry from the beginning, the French Laundry, and what I continue to love in Cory's cooking and David's cooking, is it's really about the fundamentals. It all comes. Alice said it to begin with. They're all the same thing. All these cookbooks are saying the same thing.
Yep. Yep.
What I love about this cookbook is you guys are saying it in a very clear way, and you have this very refined food, and yet it is connected to the partners who raise the food and grow the food and bring the food to you. Sometimes literally in their trucks, they bring it to Manhattan from their farm.
Mm-hmm.
Correct?
Yep.
Yes. Sylvia and Stephen priced it.
That's right.
Yep.
And Brent Wolf with the quails walking into
Right. Yeah. I mean, Connie Green. I mean, there's this whole network of wonderful individuals who connect us to each other, connect us to our food, and then ultimately connect you, the diners, to the food. And the impact that you have on all these individuals is just profound. And I know most people don't really get to see that. So I just wanted to emphasize that again, is like, it's just extraordinary, what happens when you spend $1 in a restaurant. It's just extraordinary.
Never more important to realize and recognize this at this moment in our culture and our history. We are getting close to wrapping up. So I wanted to get both your thoughts on what you hope both chefs and non-chefs, home cooks, people who care about food, take away from this book. Cory, you go first.
Well, Michael, I think we've been talking about it all night. It's the story.
Story. You freeze, but I think you were going to say story.
I think he's still frozen.
Like this, where it's coming from, how our brains work, and it's the story to me. And Chef agreed on. He said it earlier, the story, and that resonates more as to read about why we do it. I think that's the most important part.
That's true. I would say that what I want people to take away from this book is just a feeling of wonder that food can be so beautiful, and that the ingredients so profound, and that the people who are part of this process are always focused on a sense of refinement, every day, a sense of refinement. And that's what makes a restaurant like French Laundry per se relevant, is that it's this path towards refinement. So I think wonder, in a book like this is what I want them to take away. While I got you, I just want to say thank you to not you, Michael, for not just for tonight, but you and I have done so many wonderful things together, and from the French Laundry cookbook and our first contact, and having this path and watching each other do their things and succeed, and embracing each other in so many different ways that we both succeed. So thank you for the years, the decades of doing that. Alyssa, thank you very much for having us here. There's Liz Hoodle at Politics and Prose, Brittany, Beth, of course, the entire team from this cookbook, including you, Michael, Deborah Jones, who still remains for us an extraordinary photographer. And in fact, every time we do a dish at the restaurant that we love the way it's presented, we always say, "Where's Deborah Jones?" What we mean by that, because we need Deborah Jones here to take a photo of this recipe, because it's such an extraordinary thing. Susie Heller, who, as you know, Michael, is just extraordinary in production and in testing and in writing recipes. Our wonderful publisher, Leah Ronan, who is our editor, our publisher, artisan. Leah, this is her first book with us. We worked with Anne on the other 5, and so to have Leah with us is great. Cory, for his extraordinary effort and just his talent. is persistent. David Breeden for the same thing. Elvin Boyles, who, is not with us anymore, but somebody who's close to our heart. And, person I believe is one of the best pastry chefs in the country or in the world. Two extraordinary ladies who helped the team, Elaine Smythe in New York, who worked with Cory very closely, Allison Beasley, who worked with Chef Breeden here very closely in making sure that the work got done. They were running restaurants. Remember that. They just were not just sitting around writing a cookbook. They were running restaurant at the same time they wrote this book. And that's another thing to think about, in restaurants. We multitask in so many different ways, and we're committed to so many different things. But at the end of the day, what we're committed to is each other and our guests. So thank you, everybody.
I just want to thank you all for coming, for being part of this, for Alice used the word awakening at the beginning, for continuing the awakening and giving us all so much to think about. I think the only thing that was missing tonight was a meal prepared by Chef Chow or Chef Keller, but hopefully we'll be able to partake in those when we're all back out and about in the world. Chef Keller, Chef Chow, Michael, thank you all so much. This was so inspirational. I think it's just the kind of conversation that we need so desperately right now, especially, but always. And you guys are making us conscious of what really matters, from the simplest things, the most beautiful things, the things that bind us together, and that nourish us in all ways. So thank you for being part of this tonight.
You're welcome. Lastly, independent bookstores, everybody get out there in the same way that you're going to support your restaurants. Support the independent bookstores. For every book that you buy tonight, there's going to be a donation. Our artisan, our publisher, will donate $3 to a local charity. So, and that charity tonight is Martha's Table. So please, independent bookstores were so important for me as a young cook, being able to go to them after work late at night, which some are open 24 hours, and just sit in the aisles and read cookbooks. So please, they are part of the fabric of our community. Support the independents. And you could purchase Chef Keller's book on the link in our chat. It's beautiful. Everybody needs a copy of this in their home. It's one of the most beautiful books ever. Thank you again. And thank you for supporting us too. We really appreciate it.